Yeah, I was going to ask, why not redirection plugin?
Redirection plugins, I do use them mostly because they're easier for me to access, because sometimes clients can't or don't give me FTP access. And frankly, with managed host, you can't even get FTP access anymore.
Mhm.
But redirects through the server are faster. They don't have the weight of the database queries. Because if you put it in a WordPress redirect plugin, then it has to query the database before it sets the redirect.
Mhm.
And it's fast to a human, but it's slow to a computer.
Yeah, yeah.
Plus, you can do things like set up regular expressions. Some of the plugins will allow you to use regular expressions, but you can do a more of a catch-all with that. Now, I will warn you, I think I've told this story. My first SEO mistake was not standing up to my boss when I discovered that he made a regular expression redirect error.
Yeah.
So be careful with redirections and regular expressions, because it took the website out of Google, because Google couldn't access a large section of the website because of the regular expression. But
Regular expression.
yeah,
I don't know what you mean by that.
Yeah, I'm not.
Okay, regular expression is trying not to use technical jargon. It's a string of characters that creates a template that should match a search string. So it's a fancy way of saying, I want you to match this phrase, but for instance, I don't know what the word might be in the middle, so I'm going to put some variables in there. And so regular expressions allow you to say, okay, I'm not just matching this literally, but there's a variation, code. Sometimes there's an M, sometimes there's a not an M. And so we can format the string in a way where regular expression interprets that to say, oh, I know what they mean. There might be an M, there might not be an M here.
Okay.
And so it can look for that and deal with that appropriately. It's used in almost every programming language as a way of matching lines of text. And in this case, we're matching URLs because it's just a line of text. And so we can set up a rule to say, if a URL matches this line of text by the regular expression, the way we state it, then do something with it. That's a regular expression. That's hard to describe it unless you've probably seen them, at least in forms, but
yeah.
Does that help?
I think so. A regular expression versus what's the...
So let's say that a wild card, like some systems allow you to put an asterisk to replace a letter that you don't know the letter. Or gosh, I'm really having a hard time, because regular expressions are a pretty standard. Now that makes it more complicated is there's different variations on regular expressions, but okay, don't go into the weeds, David. Don't go in the weeds. So let me try to think about. Oh, so I'm really having a hard time. Hey, Google it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So, well, no, and I totally get it. I totally locked up the other day when I was talking to a client. No, I had a complete brain fart. I couldn't remember anything that I was talking about. So, you're doing fine. But I was going to say, I'm coming from just, using redirection plugin. So I know what a 301 is, and I know what a, 302 is and all of that. But the regular expression and like, I guess writing the code to do the redirection is just not in my knowledge base. So I'll have to read up on that.
Yeah. And I'm like I said, a lot of managed hosts don't even allow you to do this anymore.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So you might have to go like WP Engine, you have to go through tech support to set up redirects like this,
Okay.
which can be good and bad. Number one, they will make sure it works.
Right.
The bad is they don't know what works means to you. And if it does something, they're going to assume it's right and it could be totally wrong.
Yeah.
The good is it keeps clients out of screwing around with the stuff that they shouldn't be messing with. Because like I said, this is really powerful stuff.
Mhm.
But the bad is like having to rely upon a plugin to do it. And the overhead, some of the plugins are really bad where they will keep a database of every 404 error on your website. And that can get really, really, really large and really bog down your website. So the one I like is called Simple 301 Redirects, because it doesn't even have a database of keeping track of 404 errors. Like, I don't want that. Just do the redirects. But again, it's slower, and in some more advanced cases, you can't do a full redirect because it has to go through WordPress for that plugin to work. But sometimes you want to bypass WordPress, but that's probably more advanced.
Mhm.
All right. Yeah, I would imagine you'd like changing the URL. I wouldn't want to use a plugin for that for sure, right? Like that's something you really need to address at the server level, is what you're saying too. Like, but if a blog post were deleted or something like that, like using a plugin redirect wouldn't be too awful, I guess.
Well,
maybe.
The lesson is don't change URLs unless you really, really have to.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If there's some, like you accidentally have a cuss word in the URL or something like terrible, like, oh my gosh, this blog post we're gonna get sued for having this blog post on us. Okay, then maybe. But like anything you can do to avoid having to change the URL avoids having to had a redirect, which does make your life easy. So be really cautious about changing URLs is kind of a lesson, and think ahead with URLs to make sure that we can live with it as long as possible. So for instance, like I have a client and they have a blog, but the blog is kind of confusing and it says untitled and it says untitled in the URL. So I changed that, but now all the blog posts have a different URL. So I had to make a decision. Is the benefit of changing the URL worth it for the loss of having to add a bunch of redirects? In this case, they had 4 blog posts. So it's like, yeah, no brainer, done.
Yeah.
But I had to plan
Untitled
ahead
second.
so that when later I'm still happy with, because I don't want to change this in 3 months when I've written a bunch of blog posts for this client.
Right.
Right.